All right, guys. So here's another example where we have to find where the tangent line to this graph is horizontal. So this should have been tangent line to the graph. Okay. So the graph has this equation: y equals to -1 over x squared plus 1. So when we think about horizontal tangent line, we think about the slope. At that given point, the slope of the derivative is going to be 0. So the first step, step 1, the first thing we're going to do is find the derivative of this function. So our step 1 is going to be finding the derivative. So now this is where we can apply the quotient rule, okay? Because we have a function, a constant function 1 over something else. So we can apply the quotient rule, which tells you to do this. Um, let's say if you want to find the derivative of f of x, given as g of x over h of x, then you need to do this. Got to take the h of x and then square that. And then on the top, you need to find, first you need to find the, leave h of x as it is, times that by the derivative of the numerator functions, minus, and then the other way around. So you leave g of x times it by h prime of x. So here g and x, so this is going to be our g, and this is going to be our h. So let's write it down. I'm going to write it down on this side. G of x is equals to 1. So g prime of x is going to be, derivative of 1 is going to be 0. It's a constant term, so its derivative is 0. Now the second thing we do is we look at the h of x. H of x is what? Is this denominator function, x squared plus 1. And the derivative of h is h prime of x, which is going to be, if we apply the power rule, it's going to be 2x plus derivative of this is 0, so it's only 2x. So once we have these four terms, we are ready to apply the quotient rule. So we can say derivative y prime, we can also call it f prime of x. So y prime would be, all right, let's use this, hx, which is going to be 2, what's h? H is this, so it's going to be x squared plus 1. Then I have to square that. And then numerator I have h of x times by g prime of x. H of x is this, x squared plus 1 times that by g of x is 1. Sorry, g prime of x is 0 minus, oh, remember there's a negative sign in front of it. So when we do all this, we have to put a negative sign in front of our final answer. Um, so let's take care of that a little later, but let's just plug it in. What do we see? So then we have g of x. G of x is 1 times it by h prime of x. H prime of x is 2x. Now if we simplify this, we get 0 times it by this. This term will be 0 because 0 multiplied by that will give you 0. Minus 1 times it by 2x is going to be 2x over x squared plus 1 squared. Now this is the derivative function, y prime. Now what we can do, we can take care of that negative sign by saying that, okay, let's say if g of x, instead of calling it 1, if we call it -1, then the whole thing has been taken care of. If g of x is -1, g prime of x is still 0, so the whole thing has been taken care of. There's nothing else we need to do here. So we have this, we have y prime of x is -2x over this. Now the step 2 is to find, step 2 is to set this derivative equals to 0. Set derivative equal to 0. The reason that we do this, because we know that for horizontal tangent line, the slope is going to be 0, so the derivative is going to be 0. So if we set -2x over x squared plus 1 squared equals to 0, this derivative equals to 0, we know that this one simplifies, this one will, I'm going to make some space here, this one will simplify down to -2x equal to 0. Why is that? Think about multiplying both. Think about how can you get rid of x squared plus 1 to the powers of 2, the whole thing, how can you get rid of that? In order to get rid of this denominator, we need to multiply both sides by x squared plus 1 by this. And once we multiply this by 0, the right hand side of the equation will give you 0. The left hand side, it will cancel out. So you will have negative 2x equals to 0. Then we divide this by negative 2, divide that by negative 2. So x is going to be 0 divided by negative 2 is 0. This is the x. So this is the x coordinate of the point. Now to find the y coordinate of the point where tangent line and the horizontal, all we have to do is take this y and plug it into your y. Take this x and plug it into y. So let's do that. Our y is this, negative 1 over x squared plus 1. So if we plug in 0 for x, so it's negative 1, 0 squared is 0 plus 1. And then this one will simplify down to negative 1 on the top over 1, which is negative 1. So our y coordinate is negative 1. So we can conclude that the point that we're looking for is x comma y is going to be x is 0, y is negative 1. So this is the point where the function will have a horizontal tangent line. Thank you guys.